is to uphold law and justice, the Church of England, and to look after his people. He then signs a document confirming this commitment. The third stage is the anointing. The king's robes are removed and he sits in the coronation chair where he is anointed with holy oil by the Archbishop of Canterbury. This will happen behind a specially created anointing screen. Next, the investiture. Remaining in the coronation chair, the Archbishop of Canterbury crowns the king with St. Edward's crown. Next is the enthronement. The king is escorted to his throne, which symbolizes him taking possession of the kingdom. And finally comes the homage. Several representatives of the country kneel before the new king to do homage, including the Archbishop of Canterbury and the Prince of Wales. The Queen Consort is then anointed at her chair of estate and is then crowned before being escorted to the throne by the king's side. They then both move to the altar to receive Holy Communion. The king and queen then pass through the screen to the shrine of St. Edward the Confessor, where the king is divested of his cloth of gold vestments and St. Edward's crown, before putting on the imperial purple robe of estate and the imperial state crown. Crowned and anointed, the king leaves the abbey down the nave to the great west door. The return journey to Buckingham Palace takes the same route in reverse, but this time with the king and queen travelling in the gold state coach. The coronation procession will be much larger, comprising the king's procession, other members of the royal family, and a much larger armed forces contingent. After their arrival at the palace, the public will be allowed onto the Mall for a balcony appearance by the royal family later that afternoon. So that's what's going to happen, or at least should happen, and judging from what we're seeing here, there is great enthusiasm for it. And when I say less expensive than 1953, I mean, of course, in relative terms. This is the News Hour. Coming up, India's High Commissioner to the UK, Vikram Doraiswamy, shares his thoughts on the coronation of King Charles. Welcome back. You're watching the NewsHour live from Buckingham Palace this evening. Joining me now is the Indian High Commissioner, Vikram Doraiswamy. Thank you very much indeed for being with us. And a big day, clearly, for the monarchy and for King Charles on Saturday. Do you wish him well for his grand occasion?
Well, obviously, thank you so much for having me on the show, Mark. This is obviously a great moment in the modern Commonwealth, but also in the UK, the coronation of a monarch after some 70 years. So obviously, congratulations to the British people and, of course, to His Majesty himself.
And it is going to be a more diverse coronation, we're told, certainly than the previous one, with many different faiths represented this time.
Yes, I think that's reflective of the more diverse world we live in, isn't it? I mean, in the sense that countries are not quite the same they were in the 1950s. Our world has changed quite considerably since then. And I think it is a reflection of His Majesty's acute sense of sensitivity to the changing times that he seems to have wanted this to happen in this way.
And you'll have the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, a practicing Hindu, giving a reading.
Yes, I read about that. Of course, this is an interesting terminology because in India we, faith is, we don't necessarily talk about practicing or non-practicing. Faith just is. India is a country of many faiths and people have their faith. But this is, of course, wonderful.
I mean, we may have lost you.
Right.
High Commissioner, I'm afraid I can't hear you anymore. I don't know whether we can get your sound back, but it would seem that we've lost you. Is that right? Can someone tell me? Yeah, okay. High Commissioner, we're going to try and come back to you. Apologies for that, but we'll try and re-establish communication. Now, King Charles was 4 years old when his mother was crowned in 1953, and much like his grandson Louis, he couldn't sit still. Lady Rosemary, who served as a maid of honour to the Queen back then, has recounted one moment after the ceremony when the young king-to-be ran away with the crown. She's been speaking to my colleague Anna Botting.
In 1953, the world watched as a 27-year-old Queen Elizabeth was crowned in Westminster Abbey. Close behind the young monarch, her maids of honour. Which one are you then?
That one at the back. I mean, you couldn't be nearer.
Among them, and the highest ranking, was Lady Rosemary.
You find it all that's terribly old-fashioned clothes, long skirts, and always hats.
70 years later, her memory of the occasion just as vivid.
It was magical. It was, the music, the colour, the whole sense of majesty was amazing.
Her 6 ladies in waiting in attendance.
What's this one then? Rehearsal instructions. Did you have many rehearsals? 8.
It all went like clockwork. It was very easy in those days. You drove up to the Abbey, parked your car, got out, said hello to the policeman who was drinking a cup of tea in a little box. "Hello, girls," he said. We just walked in, no bits of paper. It was a different world.
Oh, look, what's happened? He's disappeared.
Yes.
Charles?
Yes.
He's messing about.
Look, he's messing about down there.
Do you remember seeing Prince Charles there, watching down?
Yes. There was a box with the Queen Mother and Princess Margaret and Prince Charles and a few aunts and uncles, I think, all in this box. You could hear Prince Charles sort of running up and down and the Queen Mother sort of getting hold of him and telling him to sit down. But I mean, he was only, what was he, 4, 5 then?
4, yeah.
And of course, when we got back to Buckingham Palace and the Queen took off her crown, put it on a table, and he appeared and grabbed it and shot up the passage with it. Was rescued by Jane Rain.
That 4-year-old is now 74, and Lady Rosemary's advice to the King for Saturday, just be yourself. Anna Botting, Sky News.
Let's try and return now to India's High Commissioner to the UK, Vikram Doraiswamy. Sorry we lost you there. Let's try again. And I was about to ask you about King Charles saying that he wants to make an early state visit to India.
Well, yes, that would be very desirable, I think. I believe His Majesty the King has made about 10 visits to India as the Prince of Wales, which, if I see the chronology of his visits, puts India among the top 10 countries that he's visited in his previous capacity. So obviously at some mutually convenient date, I'm sure we would love to have His Majesty visit us.
Now, High Commissioner, this question of the Commonwealth and the Commonwealth under King Charles, is there still a useful role, do you think, for the Commonwealth?
Look, I think the most interesting part about the Commonwealth is two bits to it. The first is its diversity. It is one of the rare organizations that transcends the various continents on our planet. So you've got participation from Latin America and the Caribbean, from Africa, from Asia, from Europe, and from the Americas and Australasia too. The second part of it is its voluntary nature. It's built around an association that is, at its core, is part of the UK's connection with the rest of the world, but has now transcended just the colonial part of it. It does include countries that were not Anglophone or British colonies at any point of time. So it is a structure that now has values at its core. And if we can increase its focus on core issues of interest to all countries, trade, economic development, capacity building, this then makes it a very unique and powerful force. So I'm looking at His Majesty's interests in a range of globally relevant issues from climate change. He was an early sort of pioneer on the subject, to the issue of, say, soil regeneration. His Majesty's been uniquely sensitive and, in fact, ahead of the curve in thinking of the world's problems. So I think he will certainly bring a different perspective to the Commonwealth in his tenure as the head of the Commonwealth.
And just finally, the threat appears to be republicanism and the move, certainly in the Caribbean, to republicanism. Many countries planning a referenda. Is there a looming crisis, though, for King Charles with the Commonwealth?
Well, look, we are already a republic, for instance, in India. The modern Commonwealth doesn't necessarily mean that every country that is a member of the Commonwealth is also a realm of the United Kingdom. So I think there is space within the Commonwealth for every shade of political opinion to coexist. And of course, ultimately, it's a question of the sovereign right of each member nation and its people, how they want to go forward. But I do believe that there is space for a variety of options to be considered within the Commonwealth and within the sort of family bonds that have been created with the monarchy and among countries of the Commonwealth. So no, I don't think it's necessarily a moment of crisis.
Okay, High Commissioner, appreciate your time. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you for having me.
Now joining me is Jonathan Townsend, UK Chief Executive of the Prince's Trust, who I think will be attending the coronation yourself. Well, enjoy that. Look, it is a charity very close to former Prince Charles, was Prince Charles's heart. Still, I think he would want to see it thrive. Just give us a sense of what it does.
So the Prince's Trust was set up in 1976 when young people faced adversity, and the ambition was to help those young people who face disadvantage and adversity into a better outlook, so employment, self-employment and education. So we run programs here in the UK, but we also run programs in 22 countries across the world that have that intention of helping them ultimately into employment. And it's a real focus on those young people who face disadvantage.
And where do you think this interest in helping disadvantaged young people came from?
Well, the story is that the Prince, as he left the Navy, the King now had a pension, and he saw that young people were falling further behind, particularly those, as I say, who were from a disadvantaged background. And so the intention then was to do a number of projects to help young people into self-employment. And out of that, with a sort of army of volunteers, has spun the Prince's Trust. And you know, from my experience of working with the Prince and now the King, he's absolutely passionate about giving those young people the opportunity that they might not be afforded otherwise.
And I've been to a few Prince's Trust events where he has spoken, Charles has spoken, and he seems genuinely moved by the success stories, by, you know, these youngsters that he, you know, and his charity has helped.
He totally is. He's brilliant. He's brilliant with the young people, and there's some of them are not quite so young anymore. You know, it's lovely that, you know, you say I'm going to the Abbey, but really I'm going to accompany a number of young people that Prince's Trust have helped over the years. And the Prince or the King is passionate about meeting those young people who he's helped now, but also those who's helped in the past, who are now coming back to support us. And it's that connection with the young people from backgrounds across, as I say, the UK, but also internationally, that I think really drives us as a charity. It really gives us the energy to do what we do.
And just recently, I mean, times have been very difficult for the younger generation and the young people that have been helped by the Prince's Trust, what with COVID, cost of living, and, you know, energy prices, and also, you know, this war in Europe, Ukraine, and the consequences of that. So, you know, a very difficult time.
It's an incredibly difficult time, and, you know, what the vision of what he saw in 1976 is relevant today. You know, you're right. We talk a lot about the pandemic and the cost of living crisis and social media, significant impact on young people's mental well-being and mental health. So the ability for the Trust to come in and run programs and to support young people in education, to build their confidence, to build their resilience, to enable them to really do, you know, whatever they can in society, whether it's getting that job or setting up a business, is really, really important. Now, you know, I would say our work is as important today as it was in '76 or any point since then.
And there will be, I'm told, some youngsters who have been helped by the Prince's Trust at the coronation with you. What will it mean to them, do you think?
I think it's fantastic. You know, we know how excited they are. We know how excited they are that they're representing the million or so young people that have been through the Prince's Trust programs. And we've also got, you know, a good number of young people who are on programs who will be in St Margaret's as well. And we're delighted because, you know, I think it is a representation of the King and the King's legacy, and they're really excited to represent that.
And how would you describe the King Charles you know?
Look, I know him through the Trust, and so the point that you've touched on is his passion for young people and his passion for that work, and that he deeply cares and that he brilliantly connects with young people. He has time for every young person that he speaks to and listens to them, and is really, as you say, enthused by them going into a positive outcome. So the King that I know as part of the Prince's Trust is an incredibly, you know, empowering man, and you know, a great force to have for this work, in my view.
And what sort of king do you think he'll be?
Well, as I say, I can only talk about him in the Prince's Trust, but if he carries those values across, then I think he will be an incredibly strong king. But, you know, that's not for me to say. My reflection on the work he does for the Trust and for many other causes, but in this case for the young people of this country and countries across the world, across the Commonwealth you've just been speaking about, is incredibly powerful.
Let's just have a quick word about the future then. What happens to the Prince's Trust now? Who is going to, I mean, do his sons take over? Does the new Prince of Wales, how does it work now?
So the patronages of the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh sadly passed away, and the now King are being reviewed. But the King will remain as our president, and you know, that I think is a sort of reflection of how important this work is to him, and so you know, clearly he's got more to do at this moment, so he might not be able to be as connected, but I know that he's as connected in terms of what he wants us to do in the job, and he said that, didn't he, on the Friday sadly after the Queen passes, that he entrusts us to do that job for him.
So how does he see, do you think, you know, the next 50 years of the Prince's Trust? What kind of ways will it be changing?
Well, I think that the Trust needs to be relevant to help the needs of young people. You know, and what we've seen since the pandemic is a change in the way, you know, the challenges that young people face. You've talked about the pandemic, the cost of living crisis, the war in Ukraine, the issues around mental health. So he would want us to be incredibly relevant to make sure that we put on the programs to support those young people. He also wants us to make sure that we work in our employability sectors are in areas that are going to be relevant going forward. So looking at things like health and social care, we've got some brilliant young people who are working in the National Health Service at the moment. Sustainable construction, we're encouraging people to work into those areas and working in digital. So I think he would want us to continue with that vision that he had, is to support those who face adversity and disadvantage, but to make sure it's relevant for the time that we're working in.
Okay, Jonathan, thanks very much. I should just ask you, you're going on Saturday. I mean, that will be a very special moment for you.
It will be a wonderful moment. As I say, I'm going on behalf of the Prince's Trust, but I'm going more to be with the young people who we've helped across the 5 decades, actually.
Yeah, well, very good. And we'll have a great time.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Enjoy it. Right, just time for a quick look at the weather.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
And the next few days will be more unsettled, with heavy showers, unfortunately, or longer spells of rain for the Coronation weekend. There'll be outbreaks of rain this evening, heavy in places, but much of northern and eastern Britain look fine. The rain will push further north overnight, but won't reach northern Scotland, where a patchy frost will develop. Heavy showers will follow into the mild and humid south later. England and Wales will brighten tomorrow morning, but those heavy showers will develop widely, some thundery. The south of Ireland and also southeast Scotland will be similar once early rain clears. Elsewhere it'll be rather dull with outbreaks of rain, but northwest Scotland looks fine. It will feel warm in the sunshine, chilly for the windy northeast.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
So, not a great forecast, unfortunately, for the coronation, but it is looking pretty splendid today. Everything fine. Lots of people are out and about having a look at what's going on, standing outside the palace and waiting for this momentous occasion to get underway. Plenty more here from Buckingham Palace as the build-up to the King's coronation on Saturday continues. Much more at the top of the hour. It's 6 o'clock, you're watching the News Hour live from Buckingham Palace this evening. I'm Mark Austin, coming up in the next 60 minutes. Not happy and glorious, why the King's coronation could accelerate Jamaica's plans to become a republic. Rehearsing with a replica, why its practice makes perfect for the Dean of Westminster ahead of Charles's crowning moment. Pulling a pint of Kingmaker beer, Kate and William visit a central London pub.
And how are you feeling ahead of that day?
Good, thank you. If all goes well, good. Fingers crossed, good weather as well.
Leaving nothing to chance, we'll meet the people making sure they have a good vantage point to witness a moment in history. Also ahead on the News Hour this evening, the world can sleep safer, a rabbi's reaction as Israel says it's killed the men who shot dead his wife and daughters. President Zelensky addresses the International Criminal Court, insisting Vladimir Putin must be brought to trial. And on the golf course, instead of in court, Donald Trump derides his civil rape trial as a political attack. So welcome then to Buckingham Palace, from where King Charles and the Queen Consort will depart on Saturday morning and travel to Westminster Abbey for his coronation service. Throughout the News Hour tonight and tomorrow night, we'll bring you the very latest as excitement builds ahead of the weekend. But amid the cheering crowd, some dissenting voices looking to a future for their own countries beyond the monarchy. A senior Jamaican government minister has told Sky News that the King's coronation has accelerated that country's plans to become a republic as soon as next year. First tonight, Sabah Chowdhury has this exclusive report.
4,500 miles away from Britain, Jamaica has remnants of its colonial past, present everywhere. But the country's future is changing. Sky News can reveal the coronation of King Charles has sped up the government's plans for a Jamaican republic. A senior minister told me legislation for a public vote could come as soon as this month.
We're looking at holding the referendum in 2024.
Okay, so as early as 2024, we're saying that Jamaica could potentially be a republic.
Time has come. Jamaican in Jamaican hands.
In downtown Kingston, not all Jamaicans are ready to cut ties with Britain so soon.
A lot of Rastas would say, yes, but I don't think it's not going to be better.
We don't think we are ready for it. We don't have the resource. We're like a child. You cannot leave a child like that. And I want to tell you something. Stick to the evil that you know. I'm not saying they're good, you know. I'm not going to tell you that they're good. They are evil, but I will stick to them, to the evil that I know.
But does the status quo help Jamaicans pay the bills?
Many young people especially are asking, what's the relevance? How does, a king affect the price of bread?
A recent royal trip to Jamaica where senior royals failed to apologise for slavery has also hit a nerve.
Slavery was abhorrent, and it should never have happened.
Why not a full apology? Is it because you may have to give back the wealth of the monarchy taken from the people, taken from the places that were colonized, taken from the places where the people were enslaved?
But it's not just the royal family swaying public opinion in Jamaica.
Windrush, it's personal for people. The policies that are racist and unjust by virtue of nationality and ethnic background and the color of your skin. It's just not right.
In part, what you're calling racist policies of the British government are influencing Jamaica's decision to become a republic.
Yes.
Strong sentiments, but by no means a done deal. Recent polling just about favours a Jamaican republic. The winning hand could be played in 2024. Sabah Chowdhury, Sky News in Kingston, Jamaica.
Well, earlier I spoke to India's High Commissioner to the UK, Vikram Doraiswamy, about whether there was a useful role still for the Commonwealth.
I think there is space within the Commonwealth for every shade of political opinion to coexist. And of course, ultimately, it's a question of the sovereign right of each member nation and its people, how they want to go forward. But I do believe that there is space for a variety of options to be considered within the Commonwealth and within the sort of family bonds that have been created with the monarchy and among countries of the Commonwealth. So no, I don't think it's necessarily a moment of crisis.
Well, among those attending the coronation on Saturday will be New Zealand's Prime Minister. Chris Hipkins has said he personally believes his country should be a republic, but speaking to Sky News, he acknowledged that the King will probably be head of state for many more years.
Ultimately, the King is our current head of state in New Zealand, and I think it's likely that the monarchy will continue to be our head of state for some time yet to come. I'm what you probably describe as a theoretical republican. I believe over time New Zealand will move to becoming fully independent, having had some of its origins as a former British colony. That movement over time is likely to lead to a more local head of state in New Zealand, but I don't think that will be driven by any lack of affection for the monarchy, because the royal family, I think, is still held in very high regard by New Zealanders, and I think would be even if New Zealand was at one point, some point in the future, to become a republic.
Prime Minister of New Zealand there. He was speaking to Dominic Waghorn, who's with me now. So how big do you think the threat is to the Commonwealth under Charles?
I think there are a couple of challenges. One is republicanism and one is just relevance. In terms of republicanism, it's not a new thing. The Queen had about, I think, 31 realms, countries that recognised her as head of state, and ended up with half that number. But it does seem to be now an accelerating pace in terms of countries heading towards republicanism. We've got now a clutch of countries, Jamaica, one of them, but a number of others, planning referendums to consider whether becoming republics or not. And this week an opinion poll's come out in which 6 out of the 14 realms showed a majority supporting republics. So that's a challenge for King Charles as Prince. He sounded fairly relaxed about it, but if a lot of countries become republics, it's certainly not a ringing endorsement of his position as head of the Commonwealth. But in terms of relevance, Mark, I think also it's very important that King Charles shows that he is as attentive to the needs of the Commonwealth members as his mother, the Queen, was, because people wanted to be part of a club, not just because she was a towering global figure, but also she was very good at listening to the needs, not just the bigger countries, but the smaller ones as well. And I think he's seen as somebody who hasn't done that so far. He's got to show that in the future he's going to be able to. Right, and I think that might have been King Charles we just saw possibly making his way some kind of excitement from the palace to Clarence House. We'll try and confirm that. Now, just a quick word on China and the vice president coming in Xi Jinping's place. That's some controversy because he was involved in the crackdown in Hong Kong. Yeah, Han Zheng is the vice president of China, and the palace invitations go to governments, to sovereign entities. They don't go to individuals. So it's up to the Chinese who they sent. Xi Jinping, the president, has decided not to come, as has President Biden, for instance. But the Chinese president is sending his vice president instead. Han Zheng is seen as the oppressor of Hong Kong. He was the official in charge of trashing the Sino-British agreement that was meant to have operated and controlled the way the former colony was handed over. He sent in the police in what was a pretty brutal crackdown of the pro-democracy protests, and around 1,400 protesters remain in jail. So that's led to a lot of controversy. It's being very strongly criticised, particularly amongst Conservative MPs and those groups who are supporting freedom of speech and democracy, what remains of it, in Hong Kong. But the government say in response, in defence, it's up to the Chinese who they send. Its critics, though, say that the fact that they're sending this vice president, such a controversial figure, is itself a provocation. Okay, Dominic, thank you very much indeed. We have some breaking news, not to do with the coronation, in fact, but nevertheless important, regards Ed Sheeran and that case that where he's been accused of plagiarising Marvin Gaye's Let's Get It On. Let's cross to Washington and US correspondent James Matthews. So what is happening in that case, James?
Thanks very much indeed, Mark. Yeah, good news for Ed Sheeran. He has won that case. A jury in New York has decided that he did not infringe copyright. He did not steal the musical building blocks of the Marvin Gaye classic, Let's Get It On. The case had been brought by the co-writers of that Marvin Gaye tune. They said that the key elements of the rhythm and melody, not the whole song, but the building blocks of that song were the same as the Marvin Gaye classic, that Thinking Out Loud had the same structure, essentially, the same musical structure as the Marvin Gaye song, and they were duly suing Ed Sheeran. There would have been a damages hearing later on to decide how much he would have paid for that, but the jury has sided with the British artist. He had gone to court claiming that this was insulting. He said that most pop songs could be put on top of most other pop songs. He says, for example, Let It Be can segue into No Woman, No Cry. There is a basic 4-chord progression on which multiple songs are based. And his lawyers had argued that, these were the letters of the alphabet in music, and if you were to decide there was a copyright infringement in this case, that would have a wide-ranging impact on the rest of music as we know it. So that was the argument for the Sheeran side of this case. He took his guitar into court. There was a live music defense by Ed Sheeran in the in the witness box, playing some of the key chords in that tune, Thinking Out Loud, and he was demonstrating why there was a difference in the chords that were used. So ultimately, it's good news for the musician, good news for his fans as well, I might say. He did say in this court case that if he lost, that he would be done. The clear implication that his musical career would be at an end. So that clearly isn't a scenario anybody's looking at now. Ed Sheeran, just to remind you, Mark, has won that case in New York. A jury has decided that he is not guilty of copyright theft, not guilty of stealing the basic structure of the Marvin Gaye classic, Let's Get It On.
Okay, James, thank you very much indeed. Now, the Prince of Wales says he feels good ahead of the coronation. He and the Princess of Wales travel on the Elizabeth line on the London Underground to visit the Dog and Duck pub in Soho. Meanwhile, the Dean of Westminster says this weekend's event will be, quote, jaw-dropping, and that he's not at all worried about anything going wrong. Our royal correspondent, Laura Bundock, has this report.
Their carriage will be horse-drawn on Saturday. This one less majestic, but there's a royal link as William and Kate ride the line named after the late Queen. They took the tube to Soho as pubs and people gear up for the coronation.
How are you feeling ahead of Saturday?
Good, thank you. If all goes well, good. Fingers crossed, good weather as well.
Are you
looking for a busy weekend?
Inside the bar, the beer's flowing, so too the coronation conversation. The recent rehearsals, Kate says, are helpful.
Having done some house, everyone is a bit more at ease, and then you know. It's going to be good.
At Westminster Abbey, rehearsals are well underway, and inside they're setting up for a spectacle on a huge scale.
Everything is on a really startling scale. I'm the Dean of Westminster. I'm used to ceremony on a national level. Even I think this is pretty jaw-dropping.
One of the Dean's responsibilities, handling St Edward's crown. Easily the centrepiece of royal regalia, but historically hard to tell front from back.
Our secret is not to tie bits of thread to it because someone removes them, but just to practice picking it up and handing it to someone, and having so rehearsed the number of movements that it is the right way around by the time it gets to where it needs to be.
The King, I'm told, has been relaxed in rehearsals, walking through this complex ceremony step by step. There is, of course, a reason for all these run-throughs. He knows his every move will be watched by millions and millions. And not all of them as loyally as the growing crowds, already gathering for a glimpse of the King as he heads to his coronation. Laura Bundock, Sky News.
And Laura is with me now, and there was a bit of commotion just earlier, and crowd started cheering, and that was King Charles. Was it going from Buckingham Palace, we assume,
leaving
to
the palace?
Clarence House?
I'm guessing he was going back to Clarence House. So we haven't seen him out and about today. We saw him at Westminster Abbey. There was a big garden party yesterday, wasn't there? But today he's not been out and about as much on any public engagement, so to speak. But there we can see him on his way, I'm guessing, to Clarence House there, heading up the Mall anyway. And that'll be a welcome sight, because those campers, and I'm looking at these grey clouds, probably need a little bit of royal cheer before the rain.
No, it's lovely. There's a lot of blue as well. Why can't you be half, glass half full? There's lots of blue.
Because I've got an app.
Actually,
anyway, it may not rain.
The more I turn around, it does look. It's cloudy over the palace right now. But is the stage set? Is everything?
It is. So we were inside the Abbey today. I was talking to the Dean of Westminster, who has an important role in the coronation. He's sort of the wingman, if you like, to the Archbishop of Canterbury, but he's very much responsible for the regalia. So the regalia gets taken up to the altar, and then he's the person who'll be in charge of taking the regalia, giving it to the person who then gives it to the king. So they've been working this out step by step. I mean, yesterday's rehearsal, which saw the king and other senior royals there, they were stopping, they were restarting. So it's the choreography of all of this. It's got to be precise. There's a lot of people in a lot of different places, a lot of different roles, and them coming on, off, it takes quite some production. So that's what they've been doing. There was a full dress rehearsal today. The king wasn't taking part in that, but they have started using all the regalia now. So they've been using replicas up until this point. Apart from the two crowns, they're still the replicas. The rest of the regalia, so the orb, the sceptre. And I think that was what the Dean was saying to me, was so jaw-dropping when you see the sort of sparkling splendour of the regalia inside the Abbey. It really hits home that, this will be quite a sight.
A quick word on Harry. No formal role, but he is coming. The king will be happy about that. But it's a very brief visit, isn't it?
It is. We only found out 3 weeks ago he'd missed the deadline to RSVP. Just Harry. Meghan's staying at home with the kids. It is Prince Archie's birthday, 4th birthday on Saturday. But from what we're hearing, he will be flying in, and then pretty much as soon as it's all over, he will be getting on a plane straight back to America. I think it's really unlikely we'll see him on that balcony.
Right. Okay, Laura, thank you very much indeed. Plenty more to come on the coronation in just a moment. We'll be speaking to Robert Lacey, but let's take a look at some of the day's other news now. And a bereaved father and husband who lost 2 of his daughters and his wife in a West Bank shooting has told Sky News the world can sleep safer tonight. It comes after Israel claimed to have killed the 2 Palestinian gunmen who shot them. Rabbi Leo D. spoke to our Middle East correspondent, Alistair Bunkle, who sent this report.
At 7 o'clock this morning, Israeli forces went into the West Bank city of Nablus to catch the gunmen who killed 3 British Israelis last month. During the operation, which lasted around an hour, 3 Palestinians were shot dead in a gun battle. The 2 suspects and the man accused of hiding them.
We were tremendously comforted by the thought that they were apprehended and eliminated, and that everybody in the Western world can effectively sleep safer in their beds tonight. Therefore, the Israeli army has done tremendous kindness to the world by taking out 2 people who could theoretically go and bomb New York, London, Paris, Tel Aviv, and kill many more innocent civilians.
Lucy D. and 2 of her daughters, Maya and Rena, were shot dead in their car whilst driving through the West Bank on their way to a family Passover holiday in April. Although they had lived in Israel for many years, the family held dual British nationality. Lucy and Leo met at Oxford University and worked in London for a long time. Lucy D. agreed to donate her organs after her death. They have saved the lives of 5 people already, including an Arab Israeli. And this week, the surviving children heard the heartbeat of their mother in the patient who received it.
They found it very emotional. What I found very emotional was that the lady who received the heart was referred to as Lital. But when she met me, she said, by the way, my name is actually Rena Lital. And I found that very powerful. And the mother of the boy who received the liver told me, my name is Maya. So we had a Maya and we had a Rena in the room. And there we were with Lucy's organs living in these people's bodies. It was just crazy and I don't know, a complete mixture of emotions.
The killers were aligned with Hamas, the Iranian-backed militant group that controls Gaza. The funerals were held in Nablus this afternoon, the green flags of Hamas on display. It has been one of the deadliest years in Israel and the West Bank for decades. But the Israeli raid on Nablus brought to an end a high-profile manhunt that had lasted weeks. Alistair Bunkle, Sky News, in Jerusalem.
Donald Trump has told Sky News that he will probably attend a civil trial in New York where he is accused of rape, an allegation he denies. The former president also said the trial was a political attack. He was speaking while on a tour of his golf courses in Ireland and Scotland. Our Ireland correspondent Stephen Murphy has the latest from Doonbeg in County Clare.
Donald Trump arrived here in Doonbeg. It's on the west coast, the Atlantic coast of Ireland, early evening yesterday. And as he was meeting the staff, I was able to ask him, what are you doing here instead of facing this civil rape trial going on in New York? And he wasn't too impressed by that, but he did say he was here as the result of a long-standing agreement to visit this property. Then today he played his 18 holes on the course here, and he took his tee shot, and then unprompted he came over to the waiting media, and again, just started what could only be described as a diatribe. It went on for about 4 or 5 minutes about this case in New York. He repeated the sort of testimony he gave in his taped deposition that the Manhattan court heard yesterday, where he described it as a hoax and a con job. Today, here in Ireland, he railed against the case, which he said was a political attack, and he really did not hold back on the character of his accuser. This is what he had to say.
I have to leave Ireland and I have to leave Scotland, where I have great properties. I have to leave early. I don't have to, but I choose to.
Will you attend the trial, Mr. President?
I'll probably attend. It's a disgrace that it's allowed to happen. It's a false accusation against a rich guy, or in my case, against a famous, rich, and political person that's leading the polls by 40 points. And I have to go back for a woman that made a false accusation about me, and I have a judge who's extremely hostile. And I'm going to go back and I'm going to confront this one. This woman is a disgrace, and it shouldn't be allowed to happen in our country.
So that civil rape case in New York, which is expected to possibly continue until next week, very much at the forefront of Donald Trump's mind as he heads back across the Atlantic. But of course, Joe Biden is never far from his lips here either. And I asked him, did he fancy a rematch against Joe Biden next year for, of course, the US presidential election? He said, I do, I certainly do. That's a rematch. I would win 3 times.
Stephen Murphy there. Well, a man who was arrested outside Buckingham Palace has been detained under the Mental Health Act. That's according to the Metropolitan Police. Forces were called at around 7 p.m. on Tuesday after the man approached the gates of the palace and threw a number of items believed to be shotgun cartridges into the grounds. Ukraine's president has told the International Criminal Court that it must pursue its prosecution of President Putin after it issued an arrest warrant against him. Volodymyr Zelensky also rejected any possible negotiations with Russia. He was speaking in a news conference today.
If you look at any war, any war of aggression in the history, they all have one thing in common. The perpetrators of the war didn't believe they would have to stand to answer for what they did. They must stand to answer for war. However brings war must receive judgment.
And in the past few minutes, it's been announced that members of the RMT union have voted overwhelmingly to renew their mandate to take industrial action during the next 6 months in the long-running rail dispute over pay and conditions. The RMT has already announced a strike against train companies on the 13th of May. That's the day of the Eurovision Song Contest final in Liverpool. Now here, fans of the Royals are already starting to gather along the Coronation procession route, keen to make sure they secure a good vantage point. Let's speak to our correspondent, Shaman Freeman-Powell, who's out there on the Mall. Shaman.
Yes, I am at the heart of royal fandom here today, where way more than 100 people have lined the mall with their tents, ready to get a prime spot ahead of the coronation on Saturday. And I'm actually joined by an artist now. You're never going to believe his name. Tell me your name, sir.
Charles, of course.
And you're trying to depict the atmosphere today. Tell me a little bit about what you're drawing at the moment.
Well, I focused first of all on the flags and all the bunting. I kind of knew that was going to be the case when I got here, and then I also thought I'd throw in a few tents because there's some quite dedicated people here, so I thought they deserved to be in the picture. So, and I thought I would paint what I see. So, yeah.
Well, I think there is something missing though from this picture.
Really, what's that?
I think you're missing a few Union Jacks from the tents, because all of the tents that you can see around us are draped in Union Jacks. They have been customised by the campers that have stayed here for the last couple of days, actually. I'm now joined by Julie and Robert. You've been here for a few days, haven't you? And you're excited about the coronation, but you celebrated another big event. Tell me about that.
Yeah, yesterday was our 37th wedding anniversary. Yeah, we arrived here yesterday afternoon, about 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, set up camp, and then we got a bottle of wine and we sat in our front in our seats there and celebrated our 37th camping here overnight. First time ever camping together.
Really? Yeah, first time in my life camping. Robert has camped as a boy before now, young boy
well, I was
now.
in the Scouts, yeah, I've been out camping.
And that does explain why you're so prepared. Richard, do you mind just showing the tent? Because I am very impressed. There are lots of cakes here, there's bunting, I mean, you name it, you guys have got it in your tent. Why was it important for you to make this journey, to be so prepared for Saturday?
Well, we had it in mind ever since Queen's funeral. We came up for that, we arrived the night before. We were further down the mall on the other side, and we kind of had it in mind for coming up for the coronation, because we knew, obviously then, Prince Charles had ascended the throne and his coronation was coming up, so yeah, we knew we had to come up here for the King's coronation.
And you've served as well. Explain the significance of that for me.
For me, yeah, I was in the 2nd Royal Tank Regiment back in the 70s and 80s, yeah, hence, all my regalia. We have a regimental flag behind us here as well on the barrier. Obviously, King Charles is the Commander-in-Chief of the British Armed Forces, and having been a veteran of the British Armed Forces myself, it's the only place to be.
And very, very quickly, whilst I've still got you, tell me what you're most excited about for Saturday.
I'm most excited about actually seeing King Charles on the balcony, which is why we've sort of come up as far as we have. That's what I'm looking forward to most of all. As far as the food goes as well, anybody that knows us, anybody that's watching that knows us, they know full well that we don't only bring enough for ourselves, we always make sure we have enough for other people that haven't thought to bring anything.
And actually Julie did offer me some food as well, and there really is a great community atmosphere down here. Everyone's been helping each other out, minding each other's tents if someone needs to pop to the loo, and it's all about making sure that they're in prime position for Saturday when the big event kicks off.
Yeah, absolutely. Lovely stuff. Okay, Shaman, thank you very much indeed. Well, 70 years after Queen Elizabeth's coronation in 1953, King Charles's ceremony will share many of the same traditions, but Saturday's coronation is set to be rather smaller and less expensive in relative terms. Let's take a look in detail at the route of the King's procession and the various stages of the coronation once the King and Queen Consort are inside Westminster Abbey. The King and Queen Consort depart Buckingham Palace at 10:20 in the Diamond Jubilee State Coach, drawn by 6 Windsor Greys, and process up the Mall, escorted by 4 divisions of the Household Cavalry. At walking pace, the King's procession passes under Admiralty Arch and south of Trafalgar Square into Whitehall. It passes several government departments, Downing Street and the Cenotaph, before entering Parliament Square. The King and Queen Consort pass by the Palace of Westminster, framed by the flags of the Commonwealth countries of which he is now head. At the end of the 1.3-mile route, the Diamond Jubilee State Coach pulls onto Broad Sanctuary, outside the west entrance of Westminster Abbey, ready for the coronation service to begin at 11 a.m. The King and Queen Consort will enter through the great west door at the rear of the procession up the nave of the Abbey to what's known as the Coronation Theatre, with the King and Queen Consort's thrones in the centre. Between those and the high altar sits the coronation chair. To the sides are the chairs of a state where they take their seats. These are the different stages of the coronation. The first is what's known as the recognition. The Archbishop of Canterbury presents the King to the congregation at the 4 points of the compass, who respond by acclaiming, "God save the King." Second comes the oath. Returning to his chair of estate, the King promises to uphold law and justice, the Church of England, and to look after his people. He then signs a document confirming this commitment. The third stage is the anointing. The King's robes are removed and he sits in the coronation chair, where he is anointed with holy oil by the Archbishop of Canterbury. This will happen behind a specially created anointing screen. Next, the investiture. Remaining in the coronation chair, the Archbishop of Canterbury crowns the King with St. Edward's crown. Next is the enthronement. The King is escorted to his throne, which symbolizes him taking possession of the kingdom. And finally comes the homage. Several representatives of the country kneel before the new king to do homage, including the Archbishop of Canterbury and the Prince of Wales. The Queen Consort is then anointed at her chair of estate and is then crowned before being escorted to the throne by the king's side. They then both move to the altar to receive Holy Communion. The King and Queen then pass through the screen to the shrine of St. Edward the Confessor, where the King is divested of his cloth of gold vestments and St. Edward's crown, before putting on the imperial purple robe of a state and the imperial state crown. Crowned and anointed, the King leaves the Abbey down the nave to the great west door. The return journey to Buckingham Palace takes the same route in reverse, but this time with the King and Queen travelling in the gold state coach. The coronation procession will be much larger, comprising the King's procession, other members of the royal family, and a much larger armed forces contingent. After their arrival at the palace, the public will be allowed onto the Mall for a balcony appearance by the royal family later that afternoon. Well, the First Minister of Scotland, Humza Yousaf, says that it would be unlikely that he'd watch the coronation if it wasn't for his role. Let's just take a listen to what he has had to say.
If you weren't going to the coronation, would you watch it at home?
Unlikely, I suspect.
So you're only going to be watching it as someone who's there?
I'm watching it as First Minister. I'm there as First Minister.
But you wouldn't be watching it at home?
I don't think I would necessarily be watching. I might flick on the TV just to, as I say, see the sense of occasion. But I'm going down to the coronation as First Minister. It's my duty to represent all of Scotland. People know my views. As a Republican, I'm not going to shy away from them or pretend otherwise. But also I've got a sense of duty that I take very seriously indeed.
Humza Yousaf there. Well, joining me now is the British historian and writer Robert Lacey. So Humza Yousaf not really embracing the coronation there. Will the British people embrace it, do you think?
I think the evidence is yes. I mean, at the moment the polls of course say we're not interested, who cares? But that's what everybody says in Britain. It's our style, isn't it? And I think when the day comes, well, we're having elections today, aren't we? Local elections. It may seem far-fetched, but the coronation is the closest that the king gets to an election. He's not an elected person. But he stages the coronation, or the monarchy stages the coronation. If nobody comes, well, that's a pretty conclusive vote of no confidence. But we'll see what the vote is like on Saturday.
Well, they've come out today. I mean, it is a time of hardship, cost of living, people struggling with the cost of living. Here we will have a king travelling in his gilded coach. How will that chime with modern Britain, do you think?
Well, there is always this disconnect between the splendours of Britain's historic heritage and the realities we struggle with every day. I think people are realistic about that. I mean, through these streets, there are people sleeping on these streets. Well, apart from the royal fans, there are people who sleep in these streets in London because they have no choice. And I think actually we have a king who's shown himself more conscious and sensitive to that sort of problem than many monarchs in the past.
So what about this whole idea of paying homage to him, asking people to pay homage, this chorus of millions that they are hoping for? Is that going to work, or is that a high-risk strategy in some ways?
I think it's very high risk. I think the purpose of the coronation is for him to swear service to us, and it's for people then to receive it in the ways that they want. I think it's rather ill-advised to suggest that everybody should stand up around their televisions and salute. We live in different times, but the monarchy stands for service, and people associate that with Charles and with William and the rest of the family. That's what they're there to do.
And what about the public attitudes to Charles, the man we see there? I mean, not undiluted affection, is it? And all the history with Diana and then Camilla we see there. Not an easy relationship with the public.
No, it's not. But I detect that people are rather more fond and admire King Charles III more than they liked Prince Charles. One of the things that he's managed to inject into the monarchy is a sense of feeling. I mean, I think those speeches he's made, 70 years with the Queen, standing back, it was rather, well, refreshing for a lot of people to get the passion to detect the passion that he put into talking when he first came to the throne in Scotland.
And what about Queen Camilla? I mean, how do you think she sits with the public now?
Well, again, the past is the past. Once upon a time, the monarchy...
She had a very difficult time, didn't she?
She did. And once upon a time, the monarchy was supposed to represent the ideal. Now, actually, representative monarchy reflects reality. Many families in Britain have had, many managers have had a checkered past. The same is true there in Buckingham Palace. 100 years ago, that would have, well, look what happened with Edward VIII. He had to abdicate over divorce. Times have changed, and the monarchy reflects that.
I mean, he's had a long wait. It's a very tough act to follow. He hasn't got much time to sort of earn the respect and the affection that she clearly had. What sort of king do you think he'll be?
Well, I think we've seen it already. I was certainly very impressed in Germany to see him not just speaking German, but to do it for 28, 30 minutes, very fluently. Actually tackle things like questions like Ukraine, problems of Britain's relationship with Europe, without overstepping the bounds of neutrality. And I think earlier you had the representative of the Prince's Trust. Now, there was an example of Charles thinking about what a difference he could make. Difference is the word that he uses all the time. That's how he's going to be judged, if he makes a difference.
I mean, he was schooled in some ways in one era, and he's going to have to reign in a very different era. I mean, a very different Britain.
Yes, and the privilege, the pomp we see represented there can be a disadvantage. It requires a great deal of humility on the part of the monarch and on the part of the royal family. It's not helped by problems with members of the family like Andrew and Harry, although it's their business how they behave. But it makes the task more difficult for Charles. And of course, he's always talked about having a slimmed down royal family. That, I think, will be one of the challenges in the future. Will there be enough people to go out and do the many jobs that are in enormous demand?
Well, you mentioned it. What about this toxic thing that is going on between the brothers and the whole Harry and Meghan thing? Does this upset King Charles, do you think?
I think it does, yes. I think for him to reconcile or at least reach out to Harry is much more difficult than it is for William. I mean, the clash came between the brothers, The clash was over William's feeling that Meghan was not understanding her role and giving herself too much importance rather than the job. Harry defended her, so there you've got a brother defending his wife against another brother who is defending the institution for which he has been brought up. It's not easy to see how that's going to be ended soon.
Well, I mean, he's only here for, what, I don't know, 48 hours, Harry. You know, not much time for reconciliation there. Do you think there is reconciliation possible, likely?
Not in the near future, no. I think with father and son, yes. I mean, Harry will appear in the Abbey and support his father. But I don't think we'll see much chit-chat with William. Both sides feel very bitterly and very defensively about what they stand for. And William is not the sort to compromise.
Mm. I mean, does all that, do you think it will hasten the end of the monarchy? Do you think it will, or hasten in a very different monarchy?
No, I don't think so. I mean, you know, you look back at the Wars of the Roses and the conflicts that have marked the monarchy all the way through. This is a modern continuation of that sort of thing. But there's the core of the family around Charles and William. And I think Harry and Meghan have expressed a wish to create their own sort of life in California. That's what they'll do. Don't forget that's what the Windsors did for their entire life. And the monarchy flourished very well without them.
Do you think there'll be another King George?
Of course I think there'll be another King George, yes.
So
I mean,
survive.
Sorry,
No, so William's son, yes.
Yes.
Do we get that far is the question, I suppose. Was that a...
Once I put this question to Lord Mountbatten when I was writing a book about him and Prince Philip, he said, look, monarchy is only as good as the people doing the job.
Yeah.
So if Prince George grows up and doesn't want to do the job or proves less than capable of the job, well, that does raise questions. I mean, if there aren't the recruits willing to step forward and do it, then maybe an institution doesn't deserve to soldier on.
And just finally, Saturday, a lot of the service is about service, isn't it? You know, Prince Charles keeps referring to service. So maybe that is the way that he wants his reign portrayed, as one of duty and service.
Oh, undoubtedly, yes. I mean, and service to make a difference, to reach out to from that position of privilege to the less privileged, to the to those who can be helped beyond politics.
Yeah. Well, Robert, thank you very much indeed. The clouds are gathering, I have to say, not necessarily over the monarchy, but they're certainly gathering over Buckingham Palace, and the forecast isn't that great. But well, hopefully we'll have a
70 years ago, it poured all day for the coronation, and that didn't dampen spirits.
No. Okay. Well, I suppose forecasting is better now. We know what's coming, don't we? I guess. All right, Robert, thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Right, just away from the coronation, and within the last few minutes, the singer Ed Sheeran has been speaking outside court in New York after winning a US copyright lawsuit which alleged he copied parts of Marvin Gaye's 1973 hit Let's Get It On for his own track, which was called Thinking Out Loud. Here's what Ed Sheeran has had to say.
Good morning, afternoon everyone. Thanks so much for being out here. I'm obviously very happy with the outcome of the case, and it looks like I'm not having to retire from my day job after all. But at the same time, I'm unbelievably frustrated that baseless claims like this are allowed to go to court at all. We've spent the last 8 years talking about 2 songs with dramatically different lyrics, melodies, and 4 chords which are also different and used by songwriters every day all over the world. These chords are common building blocks which were used to create music long before Let's Get It On was written, and will be used to make music long after we are all gone. They are in a songwriter's alphabet, our toolkit, and should be there for all of us to use. No one owns them, or the way they are played, in the same way that nobody owns the colour blue. Ed
Sheeran there. Now, when King Charles was 4 years old, or when he was 4 years old, his mother was crowned in 1953, and much like his grandson Louis, he couldn't sit still. Lady Rosemary, who served as a maid of honour to the Queen back then, has recounted one moment after the ceremony when the young king-to-be ran away with the crown. She's been speaking to my colleague Anna Botting.
In 1953, the world watched as a 27-year-old Queen Elizabeth was crowned in Westminster Abbey. Close behind the young monarch, her maids of honour.
Which one are you then? That one. That one at the back. I mean, you couldn't be nearer.
Among them, and the highest ranking, was Lady Rosemary.
You find it all that's terribly old-fashioned clothes, long skirts, and always hats.
70 years later, her memory of the occasion just as vivid.
It was magical. It was, you know, the music, the colour, the whole sense of majesty was amazing.
Her 6 ladies in waiting in attendance.
What's this one then? Rehearsal instructions. Did you have many rehearsals?
8. It all went like clockwork. It was very easy in those days. You know, you drove up to the Abbey, parked your car, got out, said hello to the policeman who was drinking a cup of tea in a little box. "Hello, girls," he said. We just walked in, no bits of paper. It was a different world.
Oh, look, what's happened? He's disappeared.
Yes.
Charles?
Yes.
He's messing about.
Look, he's messing about down there.
Do you remember seeing Prince Charles there, watching down?
Yes. There was a box with the Queen Mother and Princess Margaret and Prince Charles and a few aunts and uncles, I think, all in this box. You could hear Prince Charles sort of running up and down, and the Queen Mother sort of getting hold of him and telling him to sit down. But I mean, he was only, what was he, 4, 5?
4, yeah.
And of course, when we got back to Buckingham Palace, and the Queen took off her crown, put it on a table, and he appeared and grabbed it and shot up the passage with it. Was rescued by Jane Rain.
That 4-year-old is now 74, and Lady Rosemary's advice to the King for Saturday: just be yourself. Anna Botting, Sky News.
Well, joining me now is Baroness Amos, Labour member of the House of Lords, first black cabinet member, and significantly for the coronation, the first black person appointed to the Order of the Garter. Thank you very much for being with us. Now, your Lady Companion of the Order, which is the most senior British Order of Chivalry,